Empire.
It's the NFL offseason, but that does not mean we're taking a break. This is the Football Jones podcast. What's up, everybody? I'm here, Mike Jones. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And we're joined today by my buddy Lorenzo Reyes from USA Today Sports because we're talking XFL, and he was up close and personal with the game this past weekend at MetLife Stadium. And we're just going to kind of go over week one of the XFL and what he saw, what he heard, and what we think it means. And so we're getting right to it. What's up, Zoe? How's everything?
I'm doing well, man. I'm surprised, Mike. I know you're an NFL veteran. You've been covering this league for a long time. NFL offseason. What is an NFL offseason? That doesn't exist, man. We got the combine in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Hey, I am trying to this 2-week period right here of hopefully quiet. That is basically the off season
Hibernation,
and then we'll get to the combine.
That's right.
And then it'll be free agency, then it'll be the draft and the owners meeting.
Starts all over again, man.
And then OTAs. So yeah, this tiny little 2-week period is the off season, and I'm trying to do as little as possible.
I hear you.
This week, but there's
still football
to talk about,
there's
right?
Still football, yeah.
There's still football. So. Again, you covered the game this past weekend. Tell everybody where you were.
Yeah, so I was at MetLife Stadium. It's where the Jets and the Giants play. I was covering the New York Guardians versus the Tampa Bay Vipers. And so MetLife is a pretty big stadium.
Right.
It's, it holds about like 80-some, probably close to 90,000.
Yeah.
There were about 17,630 people there. Okay. So it was basically just like the lower bowl. But I looked at the attendance numbers. It was actually remarkably consistent across the league. All 4 games had between 17,000 and less than 18,000. So it was like 17,200 something.
Right.
All in that range. So pretty remarkably consistent. With that said, I don't think like the XFL, I think they've learned a lot from the AAF, from their first go round in the, early 2000s, whenever that was. They picked DC, they picked Houston, they picked New York, and they picked Dallas as their 4 home teams for their inaugural weekend.
Right.
I don't think that's a coincidence, you know? Yeah, they wanted to start this week with a lot of momentum, just generating some interest and fan enthusiasm. And I think so far, based off of what I saw Saturday on TV versus what I saw in the stadium and at the game, I think there are some signs that maybe, just maybe, and I say maybe because we've seen this happen, where a league comes out with some momentum and fans say like, oh, there's some good football here. But then financial problems, mismanagement, and other things just doomed the league. I actually spent a lot of it talking to fans before the game, right before kickoff. And I walked into this fan shop, the team shop.
Yeah.
And it was like kind of like a temporary thing, where they have those retail shelves where there's like you could just hook things on the walls. It's like like plasterboard or whatever. Dude, this thing was packed, like legit standing room only. And I'm thinking like, what the hell are all these people doing?
Well, like, whose jerseys are they buying? Because they don't even know the people.
Well, so that's part of the thing. And I'm looking at the prices. Like I'm literally wedging in between people, like looking at these prices, and I'm like, so a replica jersey. There was a number 20 Guardians jersey, the running back Tim Cook III. He's a dude who played in the AAF. He bounced around with like Jacksonville. But like, let's be real, like he's a nice player and all, but it's probably a long shot that he will make the league, like the NFL eventually.
Right.
Replica jersey was $89.99. People were buying them.
Was it painted on or stitched on numbers?
No, it was painted. There was a replica painted, like the spray painted numbers, the stitch, those are like the real ones, man. No. Like a crew sweatshirt was like $32. But like people were spending money. And then I talked to some people at the shop, and they're like, you know what, man, like we figured like this is history either way. Yeah. Either this league, like it's successful, and like we were here the first day and it gets off the ground running. So like, we're here the very first New York Guardians game, or it's like a disaster. It's like done in a year. And like maybe this New York Guardians thing is like a collectible item because like the league just vanished.
Yeah.
But like people were there, man, and they were like cheering. Actually, I don't know if you saw on TV, but it's like people got into it. And I think, granted, I think like we all know how football thirsty this country is. Like
Yeah.
the people love their football. That's great. And I think what the XFL offers is football fans. Like, let's say you're well, I was going to say the Redskins, but that's a different story. Let's say you are a Houston Texans fan, you know, and tickets are just too expensive. You have your family, you have kids, and you want to take them to a game like experience, but it's going to cost you, if you have one kid, two kids, and you know you go with your spouse, it's going to be like $400 at least between parking, tickets, food, everything.
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah, if you get the merch, whatever, it's going to be a lot of money. But here you can get a ticket for $40, $20. You can, you know, the stadium, the concessions are still going to be what they are, but I think they're offering professional football on a watered down scale. So there's that. And then I talked to the players and I'm like, all right, man, like this is the post-game locker room and I'm trying to like ask them, how's the game day operation? Like how are things going on your end? Because I don't know if you remember with the AAF, we would talk to dudes and they're like, yeah, I haven't been paid for last week.
Right.
And it was like, you know, I remember I talked to Charles James, the former Houston Texans running back, and he was like, yeah, when the paychecks start bouncing or they come in late, like I've been around long enough to know like something's wrong.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, honestly, like everything's the current XFL guys were like, everything's been good. So far, so good. I think it's interesting that a lot of the NFL or a lot of the football ops people who were with the AAF have slid over to the new XFL. Mm-hmm. The difference is that this XFL has, I think, a better financial backing than the AAF. I think their TV deal is more robust than what the AAF had.
Right.
So again, there are like ingredients, there are little factors that you think like maybe this could work. But man, if you had to ask me right now whether like could this be like, are we going to see a 2021 XFL season? I have no idea. I just history. Let me put it like this: history tells me it's a bad bet to think so.
Right. Exactly. But, because I mean, with the AAF, remember they had a deal. I think it was like they were supposed to be okay money-wise for 3 years, and then they were going to figure everything out, and they didn't even get through a full season.
Yeah.
You know, but like you said, they've got ESPN, they've got Fox, and
they've got Vince McMahon, man.
I was about to say McMahon's pockets. So how does it work? Are the players getting, like in the NFL, like you might get some off-season workout checks or whatever, but you don't start getting paid till after week 1, you know, once the regular season games. So if these guys started, I guess they're about to get their first checks, or were they getting some preseason training camp checks?
My understanding is that they were paid for some of their preseason work. Okay. I don't know if you were just on a like workout flyer. I don't know how much, if you got anything at all.
Right.
But if you were on a team at any point, my understanding is that you were getting paid. My understanding is also that it's kind of like a pay-as-you-go situation, which for a new league makes sense. So yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. The players who were active and participated for this week 1, they'll be getting paid. I imagine if not in a couple days, but like pretty soon, and so on and so forth for the week 2, week 3. As far as like incentives for playoff teams and all that stuff, if we get to that point, I don't know, but I imagine that there's I read somewhere that I think teams and players get bonuses for each game that they win, which the theory is it leads to a better product on the field. Because listen, man, if you can pad your pocket a little more with a dub, then like, yeah, we're going to fight for it.
Exactly.
So,
now, do you know, and I've been so consumed just up to my eyeballs in NFL stuff that I'm still playing catch up. Do you know like what the average salary is for these XFL guys? Or
yeah, I don't know for the average dude. I know that they had the draft where the like Landry Jones got picked, and like you know, Cardale Jones and all those guys. Right. Those guys are making again, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's in the six figures, you know, like what like a lower veteran salary would be in the NFL.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
But that's like reserved typically for like, again, the like former NFL washouts.
Yeah.
But the average guy, I would think it's somewhere between, I mean, we're talking like 12 weeks of work.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's
Okay,
not a
here we
whole
go.
lot.
Here we go. I just looked this up here. And it looks like the average guy is making like 55,000.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
bi-weekly paycheck is, 2,000, and then there's victory bonuses, 2,222. I don't know how they figure 2,222. Okay. So, I mean, so these guys definitely, now quarterback salaries,
Yeah.
there you go. Top quarterbacks, 495,000.
That's right.
Those guys, because of the quarterbacks, they're getting paid. So there's a chance to make a little money, but really you're playing to get seen.
Oh, 100%. And like, that's the thing. I think guys like Cardale Jones, take him. He played nice. He had, I think, 2 touchdowns and like a 60-some completion percentage for DC. But by and large, in NFL circles, you know what Cardale Jones can give you.
Yeah.
It's guys like this receiver I profiled on the Guardians. His name's Colby Pearson. He was an undrafted dude. He was a preferred walk-on at BYU, but he's just been one of those guys. He had shots in training camps, rookie mini camps with both the Packers and the Falcons, but the dude's just always been hurt. It's like torn labrum, really bad sprained ankle, like hamstring torn off the bone. And it seemed like he was always making progress, but it's just like, as you know, like it's a grind, and like things happen one way or another. And sometimes you just fall through the cracks. You don't get seen.
Yeah.
And he's like, when I talked to him before the game, and then in the locker room, he was just like so appreciative and like so excited about the opportunity, because he knows that in a regular situation, if he has a dream of playing in the NFL, the Super Bowl ended 2 weeks ago or whatever, and then he's basically, his only shot is to be training at home or in one of these like IMG camps in Tampa or whatever, which costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then having his agent basically like spraying teams with film and saying like, please just sign this guy, give him a shot. He's been working. He can do this and this and that.
And in some cases, like 2 or 3 year old film.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And then at that point, let's say you have the good fortune of getting a flyer. Then you have to go onto like the 90+ man roster where you're like basically competing with everyone just to like make that depth chart, and then like just continue. It's almost like you need everything to break right, And he said something actually pretty interesting. He said, because I can play football here and I can sort of like work on my craft. Kevin Gilbride is their coach, longtime NFL coach. Right. So he knows a thing or two. He can help him grow and develop. He was like, the fact that it's not as much of a pressured environment, it's not so intense here like it is in the NFL. I can kind of take a step back and say like, like, damn, I don't need to like hustle to make these special teams tackles just to like get noticed. I can work on my route running and my precision and like my hands and my understanding of coverages, because he's a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. So in a way, he's like, yeah, I think we definitely need a league like this, because there are so many players that you look out there who are decent players. They just need some time.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Whether or not this league succeeds, like the AFs did not succeed, and like the XFL before it did not succeed, and all the people who've tried, you look at all sports across the country, like we have a robust minor league baseball team,
right?
Baseball system. The NBA has a G League.
Yeah.
Like it's just
out of minor league.
Yeah, it's a necessity. It's a necessity, and the closest thing football players have is a CFL. But it's not like NFL teams are really. I mean, every now and then you see a CFL guy make the jump, but I think for this to really work, at some point the NFL has to have some involvement, right? Like,
yeah.
I think it was the same thing with the AAF.
Wanted the AAF wanted the NFL after they got started, and all of a sudden, like, hey, you guys want to invest in us or whatever,
right?
Help keep them afloat. But yeah, you're exactly right. This eventually, that's got to happen. and we'll see, just like the NFL Europe, how each team had, teams that they sent players to. It's just going to be interesting to see, because if the NFL's got involvement and they're going to be sending players there, then the players union's got to get involved, and that's something that they did not want to do.
Especially with the collective bargaining agreement coming up.
Yeah, so it would be tricky to get the NFL involved beyond just money. If it means sending players there, I don't think that the NFLPA will sign off on that.
Yeah,
but it's going to be interesting.
Let me ask you this too: if you're the NFL, why would you? Because you're still the king. Yeah. Like you run the show as far as sports, not just like in terms of football. Obviously, they run that, but in terms of American sports, they run the show.
Yeah.
So you have this league coming in, and you can sort of sit back and observe, and not really need to invest anything. Right. I mean, if anything, if I'm the NFL, I'm thinking, let's watch what these people do and kind of pick and choose what works for them, and maybe adopt our game with it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then if a player like excels, then hell yeah, let's have our teams will go after them. I think the AF proved that with the amount of guys that got signed.
Right.
So if you're the NFL, why would you do it?
Yeah, you don't have to. Now, okay, when you talked about adapting, I was going to ask you, okay, I know they were marketing, it's going to be a faster paced game. I don't think that the games were actually that much shorter, which they were saying.
There were a few that were 2 hours and 47 minutes. There was one that was like 3 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
3 hours and 3 minutes. So I think it was the games, like game time per se wasn't, I think, as big of a difference. Uh-huh. I think it was more that they felt they were packing more into the game.
More action into it. Did it feel like that to you, that they were in a constant 2-minute drill moving up and down the field?
It did in a lot of ways. So one thing that I think is actually interesting, and I talked to that dude with the number 20 jersey, Tim Cook. I talked to him about this. So all skill position players on offense have headsets in their helmets, not just the quarterback. So
interesting.
So basically, after a play's run, the OC will be like, "All right, it's 2nd and 7. Here's the call, and we'll spit it out." So you don't really necessarily need to even huddle.
Okay.
And it's like, apparently, if you're a receiver, you're always going back and forth. They just hang out on the outside, and they're like, "All right, here's what it is. All right, cool." And then they'll go. And then from then, the quarterback can sort of like, maneuver and make his adjustments. So I think that's a really interesting wrinkle, because it also, not all quarterbacks are great in a huddle, as you know. Like, some quarterbacks really excel in that environment.
Especially young guys aren't as great in it.
And I don't know. And I don't know how complex the language is for the play calls, but if you're a quarterback, there's so much shit going on that, like, in a game, so now you have to hear what the OC is saying, look at your wristband, memorize that, and spit it out. I think the communication in terms of that point is just super crisp.
Right.
So they have a shortened play clock as well.
Right.
Which,
instead of 33 seconds, it's 20?
It's 25, but they say it takes about 7 seconds to, on average, the XFL, they had this paper. It's 7 seconds to spot the ball and get it going. So they're calling it a 32-second game clock.
Okay.
Which, but it's definitely shorter than the NFL.
Right.
My first thought was like, okay, the quarter lengths are the same. It's a shorter play clock. That means more plays. That means more chances for injury. That means, you're probably more tired. Anyone who plays a sport, the more you do it at a very high level, the more chances there are for, fatigue, for things to break down. So that was my first concern. Actually, I mean, it's just 1 week and there were just 4 games. You didn't really see any big injuries. So I think that's like, okay, that's fine. But I think that's something that it's still a TBD. You have to wait and see whether that impacts it. Yeah. But with that said, I wouldn't say it was like a constant 2-minute drill, but there was much less of that sort of like downtime in NFL where you're like, okay, play ended, like, can I grab a beer in the fridge? Like, you run over there, grab a beer, come back, and you're like, you didn't miss anything. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's just tighter in that regard. The one thing I think is actually interesting is the kickoff.
I was just about to ask you about that.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw it, but so basically and I hope I get these numbers right. The kicker kicks it off, I think, from the 25. Then you have the receiving team. You have their return man is all the way in the back near the end zone by himself.
Right.
And then the receiving team's blockers line up at the 30-yard line, their own 30-yard line. And then the defenders, I believe, line up either at the 40 or at the 35. So there's just like a 5-yard cushion.
Yeah.
And then the kicking team has to wait until the receiver catches the ball, or 3 seconds have to pass after the ball's bounced or whatever, and the referee has to signal. And then the kicking team can go. Now, it looks different at first.
Yeah.
But once the kicking team started to move and attack, once either the signal went down or the player caught the ball, it kind of actually looked more or less like what a kickoff would look like, except players felt that it's much safer because there's not that vast amount of space where the kicking team can just charge, and you don't have as violent collisions,
blindside hits and all that stuff, running down 30 yards, picking up speed and
right.
Now it also looked like if you're the return team, if you stick your blocks, your guy almost has a better chance of running this thing back.
He's gone.
Instead of going the whole length and having all those tiers of guys to have to get past.
You better hope your kicker's fast because otherwise it's wide open space.
Right.
100%. And I think that's one thing where the NFL in a way is almost trying to like phase out the kickoff.
Right. And that's a problem, I think, because a lot of guys on those backups make their roster because of their play on kickoff and special teams. Lorenzo Reyes, perfect example, guy who made it in the league initially because of his kickoff return and kickoff coverage play, and then worked his way into a linebacker and made it for 14 years. But if he didn't have those special team opportunities, he's not going to get on the field. So I really cringe whenever I hear them say eliminating the kickoff. But I liked the XFL solution to that because those guys are still on that roster getting their opportunities to earn roster spots by still having a kickoff, just a safer type of kickoff.
100%. And I think in a way, having it's going back to your point where you have all that space behind you if you're a defender, it almost makes the players who are on special teams, at least on defense, you really need to be aware of blocking. You really need to be aware of like your proper angle technique. Like you can't, if you blow an angle, forget it, because it's going to be a touchdown. And your tackling has to be pretty good, because if you think you have a guy wrapped up and he slips out, then again, he's gone. So yeah, and I think in a way, like really that's one thing, if I'm the NFL, I'm like, we need to do this. We absolutely need to do this, because I also think it adds an element of excitement where right now you watch the NFL and it's like touchback city. It's pretty much like which again, I understand why, because it's the most dangerous play in football. But rather than the NFL kind of just saying like, oh, let's just, whatever, it's a throwaway. The XFL, I think, is actually saying, okay, but like, how can we fix this? It's more of a proactive solution-based approach to it, which I think is interesting. The one thing I will say as far as rules tweaks that I want to see a lot more of in the XFL. So they have, and actually before I go there are no surprise onside kicks because of that.
Right.
So if you want to have an onside kick, you need to tell the referee, hey, we're about to onside kick. And then they kind of go to the NFL rules.
Okay.
And go that way. Anyway, after you score a touchdown, there are no extra points. Mm-hmm. So you can't kick an extra point. It's not even an option. You have a 1-point try, which is basically an offensive play from the 1-yard line. Okay. You have a 2-point try, which is from the 5-yard line. And then you have a 3-point try, which is from the 10-yard line.
Okay.
The first weekend, there were no 3-point tries. because I think coaches are also like coaches by nature and super conservative. So they just didn't go that route. Also, games weren't that close. So I think when you see games that are actually close, I think we'll see more of those.
Okay.
And at the same time, if you're a coach and you know that you might have to do this later in the season, you're going to save your 10-yard plays for when you need them. But think about it. If you're a team with a 12-point deficit, you can score a touchdown, get a 3-point try, and then kick a field goal in 2 possessions. You've got that. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. I don't think the NFL will ever do anything like that, but I'm just curious as to like from an experimental standpoint. I just want to see what that looks like.
You never know, man. I mean, we've seen all these college concepts kind of trickle up into the NFL, and there's some things like that. The NFL is watching, and they definitely are looking for a solution to the kickoff. And look, they've already moved back the extra point distance to make it more competitive. It'll be interesting to see if the XFL can sustain this, and there's excitement about it, and these type of plays, then the NFL is going to start implementing in some way.
Sure.
Did you feel like I know you talked about some of the fans were there for curiosity's sake, and I know like in DC, football has been so bad here for so long that fans were happy to actually have a game in the district.
Yeah. Right.
And also a competitive team. They're just starving for it. Do you feel like most of these fans, like the ones you talked to, were they also Giants and Jets fans, or were they, what kind of NFL fans were they? And I'm just wondering like who they're all grabbing in. I know, people who've given up on the Redskins were flocking to Defenders games.
Yeah.
But I'm curious what you thought about the people up there, and is it casual, just curiosity, or are they actually diehard football fans that are just looking for more football?
I think it's definitely a little bit of both between the casual and the diehard, but these are football fans for sure, 100% football fans. For the most part, because of its location in New Jersey, it was predominantly Giants, and then a lot of Jets, some Bills, Eagles, a lot of Eagles fans. But like the funny thing was, you look in the stands, and actually people, like I said earlier, people were buying like New York Guardians merch and like had jerseys and everything. But I saw everything from like a Dan Marino old school like throwback to a Johnny Manziel jersey, to Buffalo Bills Josh Allen jersey. Like, so it's all over the map. I think it's just football fans pretty much. Like there were actually some like wrestling fans who were like, oh, we love Vince McMahon, so we wanted to see what this was like. I actually talked to some people who were like, we're wrestling fans, but we thought the XFL, the first version, was too much, where we're actually glad that this XFL, all that it has in wrestling is really just Vince McMahon, because otherwise it's predominantly a football product. So yeah, I think they're definitely looking for, like I said earlier, it's football thirsty fans where the Super Bowl's done and you're thinking like, damn, what am I going to do on my Sundays?
Right.
It's like, for spring.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. One other thing I will say, and I wonder what league executives in 345 Park Avenue are thinking about this, but the XFL is embracing sports betting. They're completely embracing it. I think I read somewhere that some stadiums might consider having like little little areas where you can, like on your phones, make, online sportsbook bets. MetLife didn't have that, but I mean, New Jersey, you have that everywhere. I actually was looking through the concourse, just like trying to, get the scene and looking at like prices for concessions. And I hear this couple, I assume they were a couple, it was a man and a woman. And they're looking at one of their phones, and the woman turns to the man and says like, hey, didn't you say this would be a high scoring league? And the guy's like, yeah, I think so, whatever. She's like, well then like hit that over, man, take the over. and he's like looking at her, and then he looks at the phone, and then kind of like, well, what the hell? And he like tapped a few buttons, and then I think he actually like placed the bet on his phone, which granted, I think that does happen in NFL stadiums, because on your smartphones you can do, I mean, it's changed the game. But the fact that the XFL is transparent, where the broadcasts now have the lines,
right?
And the commentators, if they wish, are free to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
They're free to comment on, the over under, the who's favored and all that. The fact that they're being more transparent about it, I think the XFL is saying, like, listen, we want to be successful. So if we can draw in this segment of the audience, let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So yeah, it's interesting, man. It's an interesting environment.
It's going to be interesting. My last one is, I'm just wondering, when is the XFL going to call up Colin Kaepernick or Johnny Manziel or some of these big name guys who are kind of just, Cap is definitely exiled. Johnny Manziel, he was in, Canadian football for a little while. I mean, like, when are we going to see some of those big name guys get a shot?
I think we'll see that if the league takes a dip and struggles, then maybe the XFL will make a push to say, like, hey, we need Johnny here, because for better or worse, like, players like that move the needle.
Could you imagine if Cap was playing in the XFL?
But would he take that though?
Well, see, that's the thing, is I don't think he would, because I think by not playing, he's bigger than, but if he did, say he wanted to, and he came back and he lit it up and became the face of the XFL,
then the NFL would have a problem on its hands. Yeah, for sure. Because, we can go back and forth on this, but, like, the man at least deserves a workout. I'm not talking about the workout. I'm not talking about the workout in Atlanta that was a disaster.
Yeah.
Like, NFL teams, but that's the thing. Like, NFL teams have known where to find him.
Yeah.
I think if I'm Colin, man, and I don't want to tell another man what to do or put myself in another man's head, but I'm thinking, like, dude, I went to the Super Bowl. Like, I tore up the Packers in the divisional round playoffs. Like, I don't deserve this. Like, no offense to the XFL, but, like, Colin, the problem is that it's been like 3 years now. So, like, he's getting older.
But if he really wants to play,
if he wants to play,
there, light it up for the Rough Riders or the New York Guardians. Take your knee, do everything, and be like, in that, like he said, we're not hiding, here we are, whatever. That's, like, way bigger than his Atlanta workout.
For sure.
Show, like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah. I think it would be fascinating. The only thing I would say, and this, I can't say that I'm an expert on this, but I would think that the XFL's, like, current audience now,
right,
probably has some leanings toward, like, wrestling fandom and then football fandom. And I'm not trying to generalize here, but I'm just wondering, like, is that audience going to be super receptive to a player like Colin Kaepernick with his activism?
I hear what you're saying.
Because if I'm the XFL, I'm thinking, like, we need to get this season locked up and, like, have everything run perfectly. And I'm not saying that in no way am I condoning, like, what has happened to Colin Kaepernick, but I bet all I'm saying is I bet XFL execs are thinking, would this help us or would this hurt us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, it's a shame that we're even talking about this, but I just think that's the reality in the political climate, and the fact that this is a startup that, like, let's put it like this, if Colin Kaepernick were to sign for whatever team and the XFL's popularity would take a huge hit, then
right.
it spells trouble for their future as a viable league.
Yeah, you'd have a huge population of black fans who've left the NFL that would come.
That's true.
There. But again,
that's true.
Who are the people putting the money in the pockets?
And that's I think one thing that the NFL, and I think you and I 100% agree on this, is the NFL, by and large, with their handling of Colin Kaepernick, has propped up one segment of the fan base, largely conservative, largely white, and has kind of ignored another, which is largely black, largely left-leaning. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I know. This wasn't the topic we were supposed to talk about, but like,
we just kept on rolling. But this is good. Yeah. So, well, anyway, we're gonna be monitoring this. You know, here and there. We're not turning this into an XFL podcast, but it's a Football Jones podcast. We can talk about whatever we want, and it's fun.
that's what's up.
So I appreciate you coming on and giving your insight, and you know,
For sure, my brother.
tuning in. Tell everybody where they can find you.
I'm at Lorenzo G. That's G as in great, Reyes.
So I finally figured out, is that what the G is for? What's the
No.
G stand for?
It's still my middle name, man. It's still my middle name.
That? You can just like
I'm not telling. I might, if anything, I might tell you off air, but I'm sure as hell not telling it on this podcast.
I've been trying for 3 years now to get him to tell me what his middle name is, and he won't tell me.
Man, my parents are always like, "Oh, you should sign, like you should tell them to put your stories Lorenzo G. Reyes on your byline." I'm like, no, I'm trying to keep that under wraps.
All right, Lorenzo.
It's actually not even that bad. It really isn't that bad.
Lorenzo Gomez. Reyes here.
No.
Lorenzo Jorge.
No.
Okay. All right, I give up. All right, so that's your Twitter handle. USAtoday.com. You want Instagram? Anything else you want to pump?
Nah, man. No, I'm good. I stay off social for the most part. So
he's a classic man. All right. Well, You can follow me at by Mike Jones on Instagram and Twitter, and USAtoday.com. Thanks for listening. We'll come back to you again next week. We're in off-season mode now, but hope you guys enjoy it. Lorenzo, thanks so much.
Anytime.
And I'll be talking to you soon.
All right, brother.